In this world, individuals can gain extraordinary abilities by consuming the fruit of the skill tree. With a bit of luck, you might end up as a firebender or even a sword saint. However, for Light, his fate was quite different. He ended up as nothing more than a nutting master on the day when skills were to be bestowed. Light and his childhood friend Lena were on their way to the church to undergo the ceremony. The two chatted excitedly about the skills they dreamed of acquiring. Light had always aspired to be an adventurer, so he would be thrilled with any skill that was combat-oriented. Lena, on the other hand, wasn't too concerned about what skill she might receive, as long as it meant she could stay by Light's side. Still, she was a bit nervous since no one really knows what kind of skill they'll get until they eat the fruit. But Light was sure they would both get amazing skills. However, we already know how that turned out for him. When he and Lena went into the church that day, the Holy Sister told them all about how the skill fruits work. You're granted a skill once you eat the fruit, and it will guarantee you a job in any related field of your choice, all without any crippling student loan debt. They were given the opportunity to choose any one of these fruits to gain their skill. But there was one unbreakable rule: you could only consume one skill fruit in your entire life. Attempting to eat a second fruit would result in poisoning. Many had lost their lives because they were dissatisfied with their skill and decided to take a second fruit. The Holy Sister emphasized this point, making it absolutely clear that eating more than one fruit carried a 100% fatality rate. Lena was taken aback by how dangerous the fruits could be, but the Holy Sister reassured her that as long as she refrained from eating a second fruit, there was no cause for concern. With the warnings out of the way, the Holy Sister told them to begin selecting their fruit. Lena stepped up first. She took a bite out of one of the fruits, and she immediately felt something happening to her body. There was a blinding light, and Lena's body suddenly became very hot. The Holy Sister realized this must be the legendary Sword Saint skill. It was incredibly rare, so she never thought she would get to see someone acquire it in person. But now that Lena was officially a Sword Saint, she was destined to become one of the greatest adventurers in the country. Light was genuinely thrilled for Lena and congratulated her on obtaining such an incredible skill. But now it was his turn. He approached the altar and carefully selected a skill fruit for himself, while he didn't expect to gain something as extraordinary as the Sword Saint skill. He still hoped for a decent combat skill that would allow him to stand alongside Lena in battle. However, as he took a bite and felt the skill flow into his body, his heart sank. It turned out he was just a nut master. The Holy Sister did her best to offer some encouragement, but it was clear that the only battles Light would be facing were against pests out in the fields. Light was devastated that his dreams of being an adventurer had been ruined, so he asked if he could try again. But the sister was very clear about the 100% fatality rate, so she wouldn't let him eat another fruit. Lena tried to cheer Light up and told him she would stay in the village and grow fruits with him, since she didn't care what she did as long as they were together. But the Holy Sister wouldn't stand for all this love and compassion. Lena's Sword Saint skill was a once-in-a-decade marvel, so she wasn't going to let her waste that talent by becoming a farmer. She demanded that Lena become an adventurer for the sake of the country, and in fact she would be taking her to the royal capital immediately so she could begin her training there. Lena couldn't find the courage to defy the Holy Sister's demands, so she was taken away. However, she made a heartfelt promise to return for Light one day. 3 months had gone by since that life-changing day, and Light was doing his best to embrace his new reality by focusing on his role as a farmer. Using his powers, he ensured the nuts grew large and healthy, and once they were ripe, he sold them in town to earn a profit. Life wasn't terrible for him as long as he kept those nagging thoughts buried deep in the back of his mind. One day he headed into town to sell his nuts, but since his nuts were so small, he got paid very little for them. As he was walking back to his house, he noticed a poster with some news about Lena. She had apparently been promoted to Shrank in the 3 months since she left the village and was doing incredibly well for herself. Of course, he was happy for her, but thinking about how well she was doing just made him feel like an absolute failure. Even though he knew he didn't have the skill to become an adventurer, Light had been training every day in hopes that he might naturally unlock a sword skill or something. He swung his sword at a tree stump and, overconvinced that if he could manage to split it in half, He could prove himself strong enough to become an adventurer through his own effort. But hard work doesn't always yield results, and all he gained from his relentless training were a pair of bruised wrists collapsing to the ground in defeat. He began to wonder if Lena still remembered him. She had promised to return, but with all the fame and fortune she must have achieved, he wouldn't be surprised if she had completely forgotten both his name and his face. Just then, a little girl named Isa walked up to Light and said she brought him a cup of water. She was pretty much an orphan, and the village chief didn't want to deal with her, so he kind of just left her on Light's doorstep one day. Light saw that she had nowhere to go, so he decided to take her in, and the two had been living together ever since Isa told him she was done with dinner. So if he wanted to, he could come inside to eat and Light happily. Obliged, he took his first bite of the food, and while he ate, Isa asked him how today's harvest went. All in all, Light remarked that today's profits were quite decent, especially now that he had started focusing on cultivating skill fruits. He made a point to mention that he had carefully sorted all the skill fruits into boxes clearly marked with skull emojis, emphasizing that Isa absolutely must not eat any of them. Isa, however, hadn't been aware of the dangers associated with consuming skill fruits. So Light's warning was definitely helpful, or at least it would have been an hour earlier, as she had already used several of those fruits to prepare the stew they were currently eating. Light got up in a panic and asked if she was sure she put skill fruits in the stew. But she definitely did, and from what the Holy Sister said, eating a second skill fruit was a guaranteed death sentence. All of a sudden, Light's body began to feel hot. He felt a pain in his chest, so he believed this was how he would die. He fell to the floor, and in his final breath, he apologized to Isa because this was his fault for expecting her to understand the labels when she didn't know how to read yet, as he lay on the ground waiting for death to claim him. Light noticed that it was taking far longer than expected. Sitting up, he was stunned to find himself completely unharmed. Isa noticed the bewildered look on Light's face and asked if he was okay. That was precisely the source of his confusion. Consuming a second skill fruit was supposed to be fatal. So how was he still alive? Just then a sharp headache struck him, accompanied by the surge of a new skill's power flowing through his body. Isa started to feel a sharp pain in her body as well, and since she ate the stew, that must mean she was about to acquire a skill too. All of a sudden, she was able to see words floating in front of Light and read out the info of his Nut Master skill. In addition to the ability to grow nuts, Light's skill also made him immune to all nut poisons. Light is taken aback and questions Isa about how she knows this. She explains that she can see words floating in the air, and Light quickly deduces that she must have gained some kind of appraisal skill. Isa continues reading through Light's information and discovers that he now has a second skill. She informs him that the new ability is called Sword God. The Sword God skill significantly boosts Light's attack power whenever he wields a sword and also provides a substantial increase to his magic resistance. If what Isa says is true, this could mean that Light's dream might finally become a reality. Light wants to test it out for himself. He runs outside with his sword and goes back into the forest to see if he really has a new sword skill. He raises his sword and with a single swing, he slashes the tree stump in half as well as the bigger tree behind it. It's safe to say that as of this moment, Light is overpowered. The following day, Light heads into town with the goal of visiting the guild and finally becoming an adventurer. He's brimming with excitement, as this has always been a dream of his. The first thing that catches his eye is the notice board filled with bounty quests. If they can successfully complete one, they'll have enough money to buy better equipment and delicious food. However, earning money isn't the only reason Light came here today. He's determined to test just how effective his Sword God skill will be in combat. If things go well, he might finally achieve his goal of becoming an official adventurer. He tells Isa to sit on a bench and wait for him while he gets a quest at the front desk. While he's gone, Isa takes the opportunity to use her appraisal skill on all the people in the guild. She's amazed by all the different types of skills that exist, but she's also shocked by how useless some of them are. Like this guy who has a self-damaging skill. At that moment, Isa hears a commotion coming from the front desk. When she looks over, she sees Light caught up in a heated argument with one of the adventurers in the guild. The man recognizes Light as the guy who's always selling nuts in the market and mocks him, declaring that someone like him doesn't belong in the guild. Light however, pays him no attention and simply turns to Isa, saying they can leave now. The guy is offended that Light would dare to ignore him, so his completely normal reaction is to attack Light with his sword lights. Sword God skill also improves his reflexes, so he is easily able to block the attack. The guy had no idea Light could do that, so he fully intended to catch a murder charge today. The guy's friends see that Light is capable of defending himself, so they convince him to just walk away, because this isn't a fight he can win. Jean tries to play off his outburst and claims he never really intended to hurt Light. So he and his friends leave the guild to go on their first mission shortly after Light and Isa leave as well. Since Light has gotten the quest for them, they make their way to the rocky plains, and Light is filled with excitement at the thought of finally encountering a monster in real life. Knowing how dangerous the area is, he warns Isa to stay close to him. Before long, they spot their target, a slime monster in the distance, and Light readies himself for battle. He moves cautiously, trying to sneak up on it, but the slime notices him, regardless switch in tactics. Light opts for a direct frontal attack. With his newfound strength, he charges at the slime, slicing it cleanly in half and unintentionally splitting the ground beneath it. In the process, he's happy that his skill really is useful in battle, but he knows he's going to have to work on his power management so he doesn't cause any more collateral damage. Isa congratulates Light on his first successful quest. They need to cut the slime up and bring the parts back to the guild so they can exchange it for money. Isa says she feels kind of bad about cutting the slime's body up, but Light reminds her that they'll earn enough money for pizza if they sell the slime. Parts Isa throws her morals out the window and begins dissecting the slime. At that moment, they hear shouting coming from the other side of the plains, rushing over. They find Jean and his party under attack by a massive ogre. The group had deliberately chosen an easy quest, planning to kill a slime and head home, but they never anticipated encountering an ogre. The orc swings its weapon at them, forcing everyone to leap out of the way. Even though they managed to avoid the initial strike, it's clear they have no chance of defeating such a formidable opponent. Light calls over to them to ask if they are all right, and as soon as Jean spots him, he comes up with a plan to escape. He and his friends start running straight at Light. Light is a bit confused by what they are doing, but then they run past him and he realizes they are trying to use him as bait so they can flee. The ogre now intends to attack Light, so he has no choice but to fight it. In fact, this works out well for him, since he needs to test the limits of his new skill. The ogre swings its mace toward him, and Light quickly jumps to the side to dodge the attack. However, his approach is dangerous, prompting Isa to warn him that his sword god skill doesn't enhance his defense. If he takes even a single hit, it could be fatal. Despite the risk of death, Light remains determined not to back down. He's resolved to become the world's greatest adventurer, and if he's serious about achieving that dream, he knows he must conquer this challenge. He has finally gotten used to his body's new strength, so Light jumps into the air. As the ogre tries to strike him, he slashes its mace in half. No matter what it takes, he will make sure he catches up to Lena, so the two of them can be together again. In one swift motion, he brings his sword down and cuts the ogre cleanly in half, all while Jean and his friends watch from a nearby hill. A short time later, Light heads back to the guild to trade his items for money. The receptionist, however, finds it difficult to believe that he managed to take down an ogre on his own. To prove it, Light presents the ogre horn he brought back, and to back him up, Jean's friends confirm that they witnessed the entire fight and can vouch for him. Convinced by their testimony, the receptionist accepts his story and asks him to wait a moment while she retrieves his reward. Meanwhile, Jean's friends thank Light once again for saving them. At that moment, a crowd begins to gather near the front of the guild, prompting Light to ask if something has happened. Gon explains that the Shrank party has just returned. This is the very same as Rank party that Lena joined, and it's the first time Light has seen her in the past 3 months. Light approaches her and tries to greet her, but to his shock, Lena responds by saying, "I've never met this man before in my life." Light is completely crushed and can't wrap his head around the fact that Lena forgot about him in just 3 months. He's left standing there, his mouth hanging open in shock. Isa, clueless about what's bothering him, tries to lift his spirits and proposes. They go out for some pizza. Light agrees and takes Isa to grab pizza, but his gloomy demeanor persists, frustrated. Isa warns him that if he doesn't pull himself together soon, she'll eat all the pizza herself. Light spent a lot of money on this pizza, so even if he's upset about Lena, there's no way he's letting it go to waste. However, he eats so fast that he ends up choking. Luckily, someone hands him a glass of water to wash it down. He looks up to thank the helpful stranger, but to his surprise, the stranger turns out to be Lena. He's about to yell her name, but Lena covers his mouth and tells him to be quiet, otherwise Grouse is going to hear them. She sits down at the table and Issa introduces herself, since this is the first time she's actually met Lena. Lena is just about to question how Light managed to have a kid in only 3 months. But before she gets the chance, Light interrupts to ask her what she's doing there. Honestly, Leah is asking herself the same thing about Light, since she never thought she'd encounter him at the guild. Light, clearly proud, tells her that he and Issa have become adventurers. He then goes on to share the story about the skill fruit incident, which allowed him to obtain a second skill. Lena appears genuinely happy for him, as this means he's finally on the path to achieving his dream Light. Then asks Lena how her time with the Shrank Party Sacred has been so far. But from Lena's expression, it doesn't seem like it's been much fun. She's basically just being forced to fight with a bunch of random people that the Holy Sister selected. The pay is great, but the atmosphere is more toxic than a Call of Duty lobby. So she advises Light to stay away from Sacred if he wants to enjoy his time as an adventurer. Light still doesn't see what's so terrible about Sacred, especially since he's heard so many positive things about them. However, Lena recalls an incident from 2 months ago when their party faced off against a giant serpent, knowing that serpents are weak to fire. Grouse instructed the mage to attack it with fire magic. The mage complied but went overboard, accidentally setting a nearby farm ablaze when Lena tried to bring it up, hoping they could do something to stop the fire. Grouse showed no concern at all about destroying a random farmer's land in his eyes. Their mission was to kill the serpent, and they had accomplished that. There was no reason to bother with pointless issues like collateral damage as long as the main job was completed. She tried explaining the situation to the Holy Sister as well, but she cared about it even less than Grouse did. The Holy Sister doesn't care how much property is destroyed or how many peasants are killed, as long as history remembers them as heroes. Lena doesn't tell Light about the twisted views of her party, but Light can tell that she's unhappy with them, so he invites her to join him and Issa. If she wants, however, as much as Lena would love, that there are circumstances that prevent her from quitting Sacred, she tells Light she's fine, but he can clearly see her crying, so he knows something must be wrong. However, Lena doesn't want to drag him into her mess, so she leaves the table a short time later. Light heads to the front desk to claim his reward for defeating the ogre, and is handed 10,000 gold pieces, an amount of money far greater than anything he's ever seen before. Yet he doesn't feel the slightest bit excited. His mind is consumed with worry about Lena, but he realizes he can't help her unless he figures out what Sacred is compelling her to do, and she refuses to tell him directly. With that in mind, Issa suggests that he simply ask Grouse, the party leader, directly. Since the door to his lounge is conveniently wide open inside the lounge, Grouse is currently sitting with 2 ladies and telling them stories about his legendary battles. For instance, he tells them about his most recent battle, where he and his party were hunting an evil grizzly to take care of it. They torched the bear with a massive inferno before Grouse delivered the finishing blow. Just then the receptionist comes in because she has something to talk to Grouse about regarding his recent mission. The people from the village where he found that evil grizzly have lodged a complaint against him, saying that the fire attack that Sacred used caused their reservoir to dry up completely, so now they have no water. Grouse quickly brushes off the complaint, casually making up an excuse that a bit of collateral damage is unavoidable when handling such dangerous monsters. However, deep down he secretly enjoys causing trouble for those he considers weak. Believing they're beneath him, Light overhears the entire conversation and becomes furious, because he knows Lena would never ignore the struggles of ordinary people. Like that, he confronts Grouse, demanding that he release Lena from Sacred, since it's obvious she's in distress. Doesn't take him seriously at all, and simply calls security to have Light escorted out of the lounge. Issa rushes over to Light's side to ask if he's all right. Light is fine, but the other adventurers warn him that it's a bad idea to piss him off because he may be a jerk. But angering him will get you on the Holy Sister's bad side. And if she's got a grudge against you, then it's safe to say that your adventuring career is over the following day. All the members of Sacred gather in the lounge, indulging in self-praise and reveling in their supposed greatness. Meanwhile, Lena reflects on what Light said about leaving Sacred. If it was causing her so much pain, summoning her courage, she finally speaks up, announcing to everyone that she wants to live as an adventurer. Guided by her moral code, which is why she's leaving Sacred immediately. As she begins to walk toward the exit, Grouse suddenly blocks her path, moving with alarming speed, and threatens to kill her for having the audacity to defy him. Lena is about to draw her sword to defend herself, but realizes that even with her sword, Saint skill, it would still be impossible for her to defeat Grouse in one-on-one combat. So she's forced to submit and takes her hand off her blade. Grouse then backhands her to the floor and begins a half-hearted speech about how she should persevere, for the sake of all the people their party will save in the future. He tells her that she's going to have to keep persevering until the day she dies in battle on that same day. The Sacred party prepares to leave town, and Lena has resigned herself to a life of being forced to serve under Grouse. However, as they begin their departure, their path is suddenly blocked by Light. Grouse demands to know why Light is standing in their way, to which Light boldly declares that he's there to take back his friend. He turns to Lena, saying that he and Issa were about to go hunt some monsters and would love for her to join them. After all, they made a promise to each other to become adventurers together, and he fully intends to keep that promise. Lena remembers the promise and would love to go with Light, but she doesn't have the strength to go against Grouse. She asks Light to just leave her alone before he gets hurt. Since Lena has rejected Light's offer, Grouse tries to get him to go away, but Light hasn't given up yet. Instead, he declares that he wants to have a duel with Grouse for Lena's freedom. Grouse initially rejects the duel since he has no reason to fight a random nobody, but then Light taunts him by asking if he is scared of losing to a nobody. Grouse couldn't let such public disrespect slide, so he ends up agreeing to Light's duel and plans to make an example out of him. Grow, however, sets a condition. If Light loses, he will be permanently banned from the Adventurous Guild and will never be allowed to set foot in the city again. Light agrees to the terms without hesitation, but Lena pleads with him to reconsider, fearing he has no chance of winning against Grouse in a sword fight. Grouse draws his sword ready to strike, but before he makes a move, Issa scans him and warns Light about his Godspeed skill. This ability enables Grouse to close the gap with his opponent almost instantly, so Light must stay on guard against it. Light readies his sword as well, but to keep things fair, he announces that his skills are Nutmaster and Sword. God, however, Grouse doesn't believe him, since there's no way anyone could possibly have two skills. Grouse then closes the distance instantly to attack, and Light could barely see the attack coming, but he does manage to block it. Grouse then repeatedly strikes at Light, forcing him into a defensive position because he can't keep up with all of GR's attacks. Light manages to put some distance between them, but it doesn't last long. Grouse appears behind him in a flash and drives his knee into Light's side. No matter where they are on the battlefield, as long as Grouse is within range, he can teleport there instantly for Light. There's no place that's truly safe, acknowledging how incredibly strong Grouse is. Light still refuses to give up and charges forward to attack. Unfortunately, Grouse sidesteps just before the strike lands, and while Light is momentarily off balance, Grouse shatters his sword with Light's weapon destroyed. The battle seems all but decided. However, Grouse is feeling generous today, so he tells Lena that he will spare Light if she swears her undying loyalty to him for the rest of her life. Light, however, tells Lena that she doesn't have to worry because he will find a way to win this match. Light may have been losing up till now, but Lena chooses to put her faith in him and trusts that he can win this battle no matter what. Grouse, sick of all this disrespect, plans to kill Light with his next attack. Light still doesn't have a sword, so he glances around for a substitute and decides to borrow a broom from one of the spectators. Grouse assumes Light is mocking him, and he's not entirely wrong after all. Light could have easily borrowed Lena's sword instead. Despite this, Light is fully confident that he can defeat Grouse with just the broomstick. He begins to visualize it as a real sword and focuses on preparing for GR's attacks. Up until now, he's been falling behind because he's been fixated on watching GR's movements. However, with his sword, God's skill granting him exceptional reflexes. This time, Light decides to trust his instincts and strike when the moment feels right, thanks to Light's changing strategy. His body's able to react the second Grouse gets within range. He uses the broom to smack Giar's face so hard that he gets sent flying into a brick wall. Grouse is out cold, so Light is officially the winner of their duel. Just to make the point clear, Light turns to the other members of Sacred and tells them that if they come after Lena again, then they will have to deal with him. He then turns to Lena and tells her that she's finally free. Once again, he invites her to join his party, and Lena happily accepts. A week has gone by since Light's duel with Grouse, and not much has changed since then. He's still tending to his nuts, but now he has Lena by his side, which has made him much happier. Lena has prepared lunch for everyone, and as they eat, she asks Light about the injuries he sustained during his fight with Grouse. Light reassures her that he's feeling great now and is ready to finally join Lena on a mission. Normally, this would be his dream come true. But there's still one lingering problem. Every so often, Lena gets a visitor sent by the Holy Sister for the past week. This visitor has been trying to get Lena to meet with the Holy Sister to discuss her decision to leave Sacred. However, Lena says there's nothing to discuss because there's nothing that can make her change her mind. Unfortunately, since they've earned the scorn of the Holy Sister, they are now being targeted as a result when they go to the guild to pick out a quest. They're only offered the worst jobs available, like killing sewer rats. These jobs don't pay much, so managing their finances is going to be a challenge. However, Lena doesn't seem bothered by it, as she genuinely enjoys being able to help people. She finds fulfillment in tasks like rebuilding destroyed homes, clearing out the sewers, or locating a missing cat by the end of the day. They've only earned 100 coins, barely enough to afford 3 pizzas. Even so, Lena feels much happier now that she's making a real difference in people's lives, and Light is having more fun than he ever has before. Meanwhile, at the Holy Sisters Cathedral, she informs her assistant that she plans to assign Lena's new party a real job soon. However, this task is ranked one of the most challenging missions possible. It's unclear whether or not she's secretly hoping that Light doesn't survive the ordeal. The following day, Light and the group set out for the Monty Valley 2. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more thrilling anime content. Stay tuned for the next adventure with GBJ Recaps.